Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Dirty Birdy, once again you have found your way into the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. Yeah, I have been sleeping for so long and I am very hungry and must feed. Absolutely delicious. And now that I am revamped and Dirty Birdy has released my shackles, it is time for the Midnight Society once again to take a walk into the darkness. My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. We do have Dirty Birdy popping back in. He is usually a bi-weekly host, except he was a little bit busy last week, so we have him back popping in the Fox Den tonight. So how you doing?
I'm doing all right, brother. Hanging out at Phenomicon and chatting it up with other fellow podcasters and other believers in the weird and the strange.
This is excellent, my friend. So I see you've been staying pretty busy, such as myself, man. I've been exhausted the last few days. Last night I actually zonked out pretty early, man. So I don't know. I think the last couple of months of a ton of grinding just kicked me up in the face last night. So
Yeah, it happens to the best of us. Go, 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 and then bam, there's the wall.
yep, I was sitting there and I just found myself like dozing off hardcore. So, but I do feel a little bit better today for sure. It is definitely time to grind out some more stuff after I get off the phone with you here. I'm going to do a little bit of exercising and rehab from when I broke my body playing soccer. And then I have another podcast tonight with the Wendigo guy, Ryan Tremblay. And then I have we actually took a live werewolf video last night with my little brother and stuff that we're making into a music video. So I have to go through the werewolf clips and sync those all together and send them out to my buddy so that he can add some red eye shine. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I'll be up to.
Fun, fun. Yeah, we are supposed to go hit up a ranch and go look at some pictographs after all this is said and done. And then I think we're going to head back to our Verbo and pie out and wake up and get back on the road early in the morning, start heading back home.
Jeez, oh, yeah, so you're staying pretty busy too. So no, I do appreciate you again, like I said, popping in because you got a pretty busy day yourself as well. And actually, when you first reached out to me this morning, I was still like drooling on myself. I did try to go to bed pretty early, man. But like I said, dude, if I don't get at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep, I'm pretty useless, man. I mean, 10 is usually like what I feel pretty popping off. But anything less than that, I feel like I can't plug my brain in properly.
Oh boy, yeah, I feel that 8 to 10. Yep. So
Yes. But tonight, my friend, you actually had some pretty interesting information regarding what we had talked about last time with the supposed werewolf from Idaho. And I wanted to toss you the mic here if you wanted to start plugging away, my friend.
all right, so last time we talked, I mentioned the urban legend of the werewolf of Idaho Falls, Idaho. So I went out there and snapped some pics. I sent it to you, and I got to thinking, I'm like, maybe there's something to this. So I jumped on Ancestry and Family Search and looked up both family names. The Ware side of the family didn't have much going on, history-wise. I trace the family back, mom and pop, and then Google, what was happening in this part of the world at this time, hoping to find like some kind of article of like werewolf attacks or something like that to that effect, involving the families. Nothing did show up, but on the wolf side of the family in Germany, there was a couple cases that showed up around Germany in, I think, the 1500s, and another one in the 1600s. And I was reading into them, and I'm like, oh well, this is interesting. And then it dawned on me that sure enough, I've heard of these cases before, and one of them was the Peter Stubb, the werewolf farmer of Bedburg in 1589, Bedburg, Germany. Don't know if that is still there, but the other one is the wolf of, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Ansbach of 1865. And one of them was actually a wolf that was, the wolf of Ansbach was actually a wolf that was terrorizing the countryside. But the werewolf of Bedburg, I was reading into it, and the guy actually claimed to made a deal with the devil to get some kind of like super strength or something like that. He gets these gifts, and now he wants more. And so the devil was like, okay, well, I'll give you this belt if you sell your soul to me. So he did, and when he put on this belt, he transformed into a wolf and did all sorts of nasty to a couple people and lots of children, and quite a few children. And the only thing I could think of is that this dude is a psycho, and that's what I dug up. Now, for the families, I didn't find anything tied to them. I just think it was an urban legend. They just so happen to be buried next to each other. That's that. But then it got me to thinking that, is there a supernatural aspect to the Dogman? Like, not only a physical wild creature or metaphysical creature, but something to do with the supernatural, be it a curse or a magical artifact or a magical garment that can transform people into these wolf-like creatures. I wanted to get maybe your perspective on that.
Some great stuff right there, my friend. And actually, ironically, the other night when I was with Jessica Jones on her podcast, she had brought up Peter and was talking about that. And well, there's a lot that could really come into play with that. Yeah, he could have been straight up just deranged, as you stated, or also, I mean, let's be real. When you're being tortured, people don't seem to understand. You're going to admit to anything. I mean, I used this example the other night. This isn't torture, but my parents used to tickle me when I was younger, just to like, when I did something wrong, but they were like not totally mad, but yeah, the tickle, right? And that was straight up torture. All right, I did it. I ate the cookies. I ate the cookies. You know what I mean? Just to
Yeah,
stop
yeah,
occurring to you. So, and again, that's just tickling. And I just think a lot of people don't seem to understand that when you're put into events of traumatic atrocities, you're going to admit to anything. So that is really interesting. But then also you do have, other aspects in the past of, people kind of doing that type of thing. And I honestly am starting to believe that the werewolf lore is just misconstrued with the skinwalker lore, because even in that case with Peter, he never once said he became a raging bipedal wolf. He just said he had huge paws, huge teeth, and he was a big wolf. And that's skinwalker stuff. You don't turn into a raging werewolf. You just become the animal that you had the pelt. And so it really kind of, yeah, makes me wonder a little bit more because you have all these cultures that dive into walkers and such, man. I mean, they all have different names for it, but it's in, the Asian cultures, the Indian cultures, the Native American cultures, the Australian cultures. I mean, Canadian, Latin America, it's everywhere. So
Yeah, Viking. Um, the term berserker literally means bear skin wearer.
that's what I was saying. Yeah, we talked about that the other night too. So think, right? If you were in a village and these, drugged up, crazy looking Vikings wearing animal skins, painted all up on themselves, biting, howling. I mean, would you not think those were some sort of man wolves?
Yeah, some kind of yeah. Like that's not a person anymore. That's a animal.
Yes.
And
So again, I think that kind of all ties into like what I was saying with this, like the SWs, man. I don't really, I mean, there's a few instances of quote unquote werewolves, but it's all not really easily documented. Whereas with the Dogman and Skinwalkers, man, that's all heavily documented.
yeah, I did come across just talking about this now. I do remember some cases of these people going out and going to let's say like a shaman or a witch or something like that, and they would give them a salve to rub on their skin, and that would absorb it, and then whatever was in the salve would trigger these beast like um actions, right? So you're about to go into battle, you're going to strap on or tie on like a bear skin or something like that. But before the battle, you rub that salve in, and by the time you get to the battle, you're just raging. You're hallucinating a little bit, but you've got that rage going too. So that that just happened to pop into my head.
No, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And also, a lot of people don't realize during World War II and even into World War One, the Nazis reported seeing basically like Germanic tribes that didn't want anything to do with them, that still, lived off the land and such, that would basically wear skins like that and try to attack them and such. So, also, it's interesting too, maybe if some of the quote unquote Nazi werewolf lore came from just some of those crazy people. Because again, I mean, even if you're soldiers and you're walking through the forest and you're seeing shadows of things and people wearing like animal skins, I mean, that's obviously going to cause some sort of psychological effect. And I mean, people also don't realize that no matter what, our minds try to paint whatever it is that we want it to paint. So again, it's really interesting for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine being a soldier. It doesn't matter who you're fighting for, and you're in a small 5-man group and patrolling the forest, and you're seeing what you think are wolfman creatures darting in between trees, and yeah, and around your perimeter at dusk or like a full moon night or whatever. Yeah, that would freak you. That would freak you out. It's a type of psychological warfare to me.
And a lot of people also, I think, with the misidentifications, thinking that I talked about this with Jessica as well, assuming that something has to quote unquote be a werewolf because it has clothing on. But the cynocephali, for example, were an ancient human race that wore clothing as well as animal skins and everything along the lines of that. So I think a lot of times, again, if people are seeing that, they just assume it had to be in human form at a point in time, but it doesn't necessarily. And I also, again, with like the Rougarou and things like that, I mean, I really think they're just seeing like Dogman because our science team has a theory that the cynocephali used to have a great culture, just like, Egyptians, Romans, other cultures throughout history, but it had a collapse, which now would explain why they've dwindled in numbers and they're sporadically seen.
Yeah, a lot of ancient cultures only have a shelf life of, I think somebody said like 250 years, and then they collapse, and then they have to spread out and fend for themselves. So who knows? Maybe after the Great Collapse, because um, yeah, the Xenocephali, they're used to being in the mountains. So who knows if they didn't migrate over the Great Land Bridge? when it was there, and just migrated into our forest, and that's where they stay. That's where they're happy, because who knows?
And you got all the cave systems and everything, which it would make a ton of sense as to where they're traveling around. So, yeah, no, it's just really interesting. And also, there is a hypothesis floating around that the Greeks and Romans, and even maybe potentially the Egyptians and things, and some of the other great cultures actually didn't build their structures or their buildings on their own. They actually inherited them from like the cynocephali.
Huh? I never heard that theory, but yeah, it would make sense. I mean, you start building a giant civilization, and you're like, well, we got these things out here. I guess they're ours now because the original owners just left. So, and it's going to stand forever, pretty much.
And everyone does that. I mean, humans, animals, obviously, if it takes less time frame, do you build a house every time you want to move into one, or you just move into a pre-built one? Or same thing with like wolves and coyotes and hyenas and such. Of course, all them will dig their own dens and such, but they're also going to, take a den that's already been built as well to save energy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that it costs them food and energy to dig a new den every time they move to another area. So if there's already a pre-built one from, say, a cougar or a bear, they're gonna move into that because it's just easier. That's just nature in general.
Yes, 100%. And also, a lot of people don't realize predators don't, like to expel energy whatsoever. They have very limited amounts of energy stored up for what it is they need to do. So if they fail, usually within the first or couple attempts at an attack, they leave. Okay. Whereas like herbivores, for example, like deer and stuff, have a ton of built up energy, which is why they fight back and like can mess people up and things like that. Whereas you could, potentially discourage that mountain lion or whatever to get away from you, whereas the
Well,
deer keeps coming.
yeah. With predators, it's a lot of risk versus reward. If it gets injured, it's probably gonna. So, and then if there's one person, then the reward is higher, but it's still a risk. And again, if it's a hiker and it's got a sidearm and it shoots it and it wounds it, then it's going to wander off somewhere and die. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. So, but yeah, a lot of big predators do the risk and reward system. So, considering a dogman like creature, yeah, it'll probably size you up. And if it's smart, like human smart, it knows what a gun is, it knows what a sidearm is, or a bow, and it's either gonna leave you alone or it will attack you, depending on circumstances.
100%, my friend. And that makes a ton of valuable information and valid points. And that's what I say. I just think a lot of people misunderstand that stuff in regards and they just don't realize. But we also do have a theory that, because I mean, hyenas are one of the only known animals that have been able to survive like straight up traumatic injuries, and they're actually the males of the group, so they're really low in the totem pole as well because hyena groups are run by females usually. But either way, what they don't realize is that some of these males, who, like I said, bottom of the food chain, will have their intestines hanging out, all kinds of grotesque injuries that people would have thought would have caused them to no longer exist, but they actually are able to still survive, and they are immune to rabies and anthrax and stuff like that. So that's what I try to say to people is it really all depends. I mean, if it's that quote unquote dogman has the capability to kind of nurture itself back like a hyena or something, sure. But if it's just kind of like a cougar or something like a glass cannon, I mean, what happens when that adrenaline drops? So when it gets blasted up, it's got all the adrenaline, it's all hyped up. Okay. So it continues its assault. But then what happens when it runs off and the adrenaline drops? I mean, it's no different than like in a war where you're surprisingly this one person's been shot like 8, 9 times and is still out there doing all this crazy stuff. But then all of a sudden, as soon as like their blood pressure drops, it is bleed out. And yeah, it's one of those ones where you have to wonder is what happens once it retreats.
Uh, well, I know a lot of big cats. They go find a little hidey hole somewhere and and for some reason they don't want other scavengers to find their body and pick it apart, which I find interesting. But yeah, hyenas are really adaptable creatures. I think I think even their stomach is specialized to eat rotting meat and just all sorts of nasty, and they don't get sick, and their immune system is really great for healing. So yeah, I couldn't imagine a quote unquote were hyena roaming around and just it can do whatever it wants. Well, it can eat whatever it wants and sustain any injury. It's pretty much a tank. It's unstoppable.
Yeah, no, and I've mentioned this before. A lot of people don't realize. Everyone likes to say the king of Africa is the lions, but in actuality, the spotted hyena has a 90% success ratio when it comes to hunting, and they actually love hunting. People think that they're scavengers. No, they're just like any other animal. They'll capitalize off of that. But the scavenger hyenas are the subspecies, like the striped hyena, not the spotted. The spotted is in big packs. I think the largest pack was like up to 160 plus, and they just hunt. That's what they do. So, yeah, no, they have a very high acidic level in their stomach, which causes them not to really get sick about things. And a lot of times, though, again, people don't realize because Survivor Man, big fan of his. I'm trying to actually get him up on here at some point. He was saying that we are snobbish as people as to what we'll eat, but there's been times where he's had to eat things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought about eating, but even the human stomach can withstand more than we think it can.
Oh yeah, yeah. The old what was the old wives' tale of if you swallow bubble gum, it stays in your stomach for 7 years? No, no, that's false. Our
Or growing apple seeds. Yeah.
yeah, I swallow watermelon seeds, you're going to grow in your stomach. No, no, not true at all. Um, I do believe that our stomach acid is strong enough to eat through iron
Yes.
or steel or something like that. So yeah, I mean, we've become so accustomed to, you know, going to the grocery store or going to the convenience store or fast food or something like that, where it's all cooked. We don't have to hunt anything anymore. So if you're, say, a bachelor male and you're roaming the countryside and you come across something that's might have been 2 or 3 days, and you haven't ate for 2 or 3 days, you're gonna eat that thing, and you're not gonna think twice about it because you're starving. And yeah, people forget the difference between I'm hungry and I'm starving.
And an example of that, just like my pet squirrel, like I always say, I got other squirrel friends that come over, right? But I feed them. They're very well fed. So, like the other day, I chucked out a carrot. None of them ate that, but again, like you said, if they were super hungry, they would eat a carrot. I've seen them eating carrots before, but I mean, they have plenty of bird seed, and like I said, I put them out like specific types of seeds and things. So yeah, again, they go for the seeds and the peanut butter and stuff, not the actual carrot.
I've seen a what a gray squirrel chew through the jar of a peanut butter jar to get to the
Yes.
leftover peanut butter, and I was amazed at how this little creature could just gnaw through pretty thick plastic to get into the peanut butter. And then I remember that squirrels have more bite force per square inch than any other mammal. And I was like,
I know it. Isn't that
dang.
so cool because they're so gentle with me. They come up and just get it right out of my hand. But yeah, they could, take a big chunk if they really wanted to. Super cool, but interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, now imagine a were hyena and their bite force per square inch, except it's standing upright and it's got hands and it can grab you and bite you. How terrifying is that?
Yeah, that's some pretty messed up stuff. And I'd pull up the chart right now, but for some reason, sometimes even though you can, if I switch back and forth in my Skype while I'm recording to look at photos, when I go into my video editor, sometimes it literally just like stops, like in the video, and I have to cut out a little segment. It's so bizarre. But I have a chart that actually talks about bite force, and I believe the only animal that has a larger bite force than the hyena is a grizzly bear, but it's also like 4 times the size of it.
Yeah, now imagine a were hyena or a cave hyena that still hasn't went extinct roaming around. That's the size of a freaking grizzly bear. That,
Well, have you
well,
heard
yeah,
about that raccoon that was the size of a Volkswagen that existed at one point in time? I'd like to dive more into that when I get a chance to actually do some research on it. But canines, bears, raccoons kind of all branched off. Before that, they were all kind of like this one species. And raccoons are related to foxes and such, which is super interesting. But the Native Americans also called them wandering bears and the long-tailed bears. And like I said, at a point in time, there was a raccoon the size of a Volkswagen, and a ton of people just report in the sightings that they look like raccoons, raccoon-like hands, raccoon-like feet. And I mean, I think raccoons are super cool. But when I used to date some girl at the University of Maine up in Orono, when I'd bring her trash out for her or whatever, man, some of those dumpster squirrels and dumpster raccoons were straight up out of a nightmare movie, dude. I would open up the thing and whoa, and this thing is just, it's not even a quarter of my size, this raccoon, and it's ready to rumble. And I'm like, yo, man, here, I'm out of here, dude. I don't want anything to do with this.
yeah. That's when you just swing the bag of garbage at them and you're like, take it, I'm leaving, go for it.
Exactly. He's like, what are you doing in here? Hey, man, I don't want anything to do with this, dude. But at the same time, though, raccoons can be like super, super cool. Like there's some of the neighborhood ones that come around, and I've paid attention to them, make sure they're acting normal and such, which they are. And there's a little family of them. And later at night, sometimes if like the side door's open, they'll sit up on the porch and I'll chuck them like carrots and stuff. It's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, the first time I ever saw a raccoon, I could not believe how big they were. I'm, I grew up in my city, uh, like 45 years, never saw a raccoon until, let's see, about 10 years ago. I'm coming home from work and I see something running along these concrete barriers of the river. And I'm like, what am I looking at there? I'm like, is that a cat? I'm like, that's not a cat. And I'm getting closer and I'm like, that's definitely not a cat. Cats don't have striped tails. And I'm like, that's a raccoon. And it was huge, like the size of a bowling ball, just running around. I'm like, well, dang, man. Like, yeah, for sure. I I would hate to like take the garbage out at night, open the can lid, and there's an angry striped bowling ball getting ready to rumble. And yeah, no,
Yeah, the
I'd
trash
rather.
cans can definitely be pretty chaotic, man. Like I said, they're super
Oh,
cool, but they are definitely outrageously savage if they'd like to be. That is for sure, dude.
yeah, man. You see them on TV and you're like, oh, cute and cuddly, and you see them in real life and you're like, no.
Dude, any animal. That's what I was saying. Like the other day, I went over to let my friend's dog out, and I mean, it was my own fault because I mean, my squirrel would never hurt me. But again, she is an animal with a large claws, and I had no shirt on, and she didn't want to go into her cage while I went over and was hanging out with my friend's dog. She wanted to stay outside with the other squirrels, you know? No, she was so ticked off of me, bro. Scratched up one of my arms, down my chest, up the other side of my arm, dude. She wasn't like trying to scratch, she's trying to get away. You know what I mean? Like, not get away, but just like, yo, I'm going back outside. So, yeah, no, it is, people just don't realize how strong or savage an actual animal can be.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. It's all these. people that are online and they're like, oh, look at this cute, cuddly little thing. And you're like, are you kidding me? That's a monster. That's a pint-sized monster. You let that, even think about sticking your hand out to pet it, and it's going to probably take the tip of your finger off.
Yeah, you don't want that. That is definitely for sure right there, my friend. You definitely don't want that. That is so funny. But no, I do appreciate you popping in tonight, man, and hanging out with us because I know you're actually in the middle of a nice little expedition yourself, man. So to be able to sneak away is good things. And you always bring some really good information and content to Midnight Lycanthropy. So I do appreciate it. And I definitely look forward to our future collaborations. You are actually really good at bringing in your own information. I mean, I have a ton of stuff on file, but it is really good to have hosts to, be proactive like that.
You're very, very welcome. We are still trying to get a hold of the Natural History Museum curator,
Yep.
one of the bigwigs, and we're gonna try it and get to the basement. And I think they have a cave hyena skeleton down there. So we want to sneak down there and take some pictures, get some measurements, and just find out what type of creature we could possibly be dealing with.
That's beautiful. Yeah, make sure you definitely, keep me posted on all of that. And I'm not sure if they museum copyrights their stuff like that. I don't know, but any of the measurements, if you could send all that over, because then I can just either draw my own rendition or just mess around with some of the AI to get like a skeletal setup of a cave hyena, and I can put all that information in for sure.
I will do that. I will definitely keep you posted.
Thank you for everybody who stopped in tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you very soon.